Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode. Today, we're talking about why you might have mystery failures on prints. If you're like me and you have multiple printers and you run prints off multiple printers at the same time, you've probably run into an issue where once in a while you're going to get one printer that's going to succeed with the print and the other printer won't. And this has nothing to do with the settings, this has nothing to do with the resin. Those are all identical. And I know some of you out there have had this issue where you've run into this confusion and you're like, what the heck happened? Why is this one working here, but it's not working here? And so what I plan to kind of discuss here while I'm doing this time-lapse supporting video is going over the reasons why you might have this issue and some of the troubleshooting steps that you can kind of go over to see what the heck you can do to fix it if you have this problem. Now, number one, I'm always going to tell people this: check the support work. If the file was pre-supported, consider going in and doing it yourself. If you don't know if it was a trustworthy company, or even if you just feel like maybe, hey, I could do a better job here, this just didn't turn out well. There are obvious key points you need to kind of pay attention. How much did your print fail on one printer versus the other? And if we're not talking about, oh, I had two printers and two prints running at the same time, maybe you printed this file once before, then you came back a little while later and you printed it again on the same exact printer. There could be a load of issues as to why. It could just be the age of the printer. And again, that could be the same issue with someone having multiple printers. We're going to go over all that. Most of the time, the issue with troubleshooting a support problem like this is that when you've gone and printed something and you see it being successful, and then you come back later and it's not, or you print it on multiple printers and you're having issues with one and not the other, there's a lot of confusion there, and your brain just goes, what? That doesn't make sense. So in order to troubleshoot it, there's a lot of things you kind of have to consider, and there's variable points there too, obviously. Like I said, number one, check the support work. That's the biggest thing. If there's giant gaps in between the support rods, or if you've got this, issue where the islands are just supported by one little tiny support bar and there's not much else going on there, then maybe you should go in and kind of beefing up some of the supporting, and that will help you kind of like reduce the amount or percentage of failure that you're going to have with a particular print. Now, I talked to a couple folks online, and some of them told me that they feel like no matter what, regardless of the success ratio, sometimes a print will just simply fail due to chaos dynamics. And I guess that has a lot to do with fluid being kind of chaotic and doing what it wants. But for the most part, if your light matrix, your printer, your lighting system, whatever you're using, is working and your system is functioning normally, you really shouldn't have too much chaos in the mixture. Although I suppose it could happen once in a while. You'd see a random variable, or maybe like a hair got in there, prevented a couple layers from curing, and then boom, all of a sudden you have an issue. I don't think that happens too often. But anyway, like I said, number one, check your support work. Number two, check the printer hardware, and that includes everything. Check the FEPs, check your entire VAT, make sure you don't have bits floating in it. Check your lighting system, run detections. Which most printers have detections where you can run a detection block and see how that's working, see how well that's working. Clean the vat. You don't have to do like a full empty clean. You can run like an exposure clean, or frozen printers have a cleaning system. Some newer printers have cleanings on them where essentially it exposes that bottom layer for about 30 to 40 seconds and you can just kind of peel it off. Relevel your build plate. Those are kind of the basics, and a lot of folks know this already, so I'm talking repetitious for some of you, but for the new folks, remember, these are things you need to consider. If you have just a random failure like that, where this worked last month but it's not working now. Releveling the build plate in a lot of cases actually fixes a lot of percentage of people's failed prints. The build plate does kind of slowly knock itself out of whack, which is why some of the newer printers that are advertising being like level free, such as the M5, kind of make me wonder if they can really keep up the promise long term, or how well that's going to work long term. But we'll see. Number three is going to be environmental issues that may have affected one printer over the other, or may have affected the printer at the time this time and not last time. Was it a little bit colder? Remember, the temperature needs to be a nice, usually most resins rest between 25 and 30 degrees Celsius, which is about 75 to 80 degrees. Fahrenheit, and that's a decent temperature, but it's not super hot, and it's not cold or cool either. But 75 degrees is a decent temperature. It's not chilly, but it's not hot either. The printers don't necessarily like to be in hot either, because the high temperatures will definitely have adverse effects eventually on the computing and mechanics. There's, I mean, we're talking about, this is hardware and, pieces of circuit board and other kinds of material in there, as well as the actuators and, kinds of stuff like that. That's all going to get damaged by heat and moisture. So if you're in a high humidity area, like I keep my machines in a garage, you're going to have to protect them from that, or you're going to have to clean them and make sure that they stay maintained. That's always a thing to consider. Environmental issues definitely can affect your printer. Number 4, check your USB drive. Format it, re-export it. Format it and then re-export your slice file. And that way you'll have an opportunity to go, okay, was it just the slice file? That's happened. I've had corrupted files or corrupted drives. There's usually a telltale sign that the drive is acting funny or sluggish. At least on my printers, I've noticed when I go to hit the print button to open up the directory, it will go a little slow. It'll sluggishly kind of load up the directory, and then I know it needs a format or my printer's not reading it well. And in that case, what I'll do is I'll either reboot the printer, I'll reinsert the USB stick, and I'll try that again. If that doesn't work, I'll go ahead and flash the drive, and I'll either grab a new drive and re-export the file, or I'll just re-export the file onto that drive if I format it. So that is something to consider. If your drives are just stinky and they're not working at all, like if you're still using the manufacturer drives, go get some new ones. They're really cheap. Please, go get some new ones. Don't use the ones the manufacturers give you. They're terrible. So that's always something to consider. Number 6, simply re-export the file. Like I said above, sometimes it's just the file gets corrupted. If you think you're positive my USB drive is awesome and there's nothing wrong with it, then just simply re-export the file and give it a shot. But please, at least re-level your build plate, run a detection test, clean the VAT, do the hardware check that I suggested, because simple things like that can prevent you from wasting time and resin if the printer actually has a hardware problem. And number 7, and this is the biggest one, this is actually going to lead to one of the issues I was going to talk about, is you need to analyze the break or failure area. Was it odd? Did it pancake? Was it stringy? Did you have failed support as well? Some of this could be an issue that I have kind of called tilting. Essentially, what happens here, and I've had this happen on one of my printers more recently, the build plate seems fine, will level, and at times, after a few prints or just one, essentially the build plate will tilt. This is due to the bolts becoming stripped over either use or just faulty. This will cause parts of the prints to fail, tear, or rip away from the supports in the build plate. So yeah, that can cause some massive problems right there, and that will cause your prints to fail in some very odd ways. And it would definitely be exclusive to one printer over the other. If you had a couple printers, or just even if it was just one, if your build plate's starting to fail, that's one of the areas that you can look at, is in the bolts. And I believe you can replace most of those bolts, or just replace the entire build plate if it's getting to that point. If after all this you still can't resolve your mystery fails, consider checking with any other folks who use the same STLs. Maybe they've had the same issues. Maybe they could offer some advice. It's hard to say what the issue is every time, but at least by following some of these steps that I gave you, I think you can jump into it with some good logic along the way. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching. I hope this episode was educational for all of you. Again, hit that subscribe, like. Don't forget to leave me some comments. I love to hear from you folks, and we'll see you all again soon. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.